Hey everybody, Kris here from Rasa, talking about the most important tissue in the human body. I'm a licensed massage therapist, Ayurvedic health coach, and yoga specialist who teaches people how to break free of chronic pain and fear, especially around the aging process, so we can bring vitality, mobility, and a little pizzazz for decades to come. Now, when we talk about the first tissue in Ayurvedic medicine, we're talking about what we refer to as Rasa, Rasa dhatu. It is the liquid portions of the body, that initial breakdown of our food substances. It's the plasma, the lymph, the liquid portions in the body that serve to nourish and protect our tissues. Cerebral spinal fluid, synovial joint fluid, these will all be classified in Ayurvedic medicine as Rasa dhatu. And it's the very first tissue that's formed after we've digested a meal and also digested our experiences, right? With the body, the body remembers everything, right? We say as massage therapists that we hold our issues in the tissues, both in the gross and subtle bodies. And I'm going to talk about a couple of important ways actually to take care of this tissue and its hydration, which is the most important thing about it. We want our fascia and connective tissue and all of these portions of our bodies to be well hydrated so that they can remain soft, supple, and mobile, so that anatomical structures can slide and glide next to each other easily without getting stuck and stiff, which produces the pain and immobility so many of us associate with aging. And the yogis were really in tune with what Rasa dhatu needed in order to have a strong, balanced digestive capacity and then build on to form really strong blood tissue, muscle tissue, bone tissue, fat tissue, nerve tissue, and ultimately our reproductive tissue. And that is how we build immune strength and our capacity to digest our lives. And a big part of staying hydrated with this tissue isn't about how much water you're drinking. Yes, we do need a certain amount of water, and each person's body type will have different needs. But aside from the amount of water you have in your stomach, an important component to keeping rasa tissue really healthy and hydrated is the variety and frequency of movement in the body. So when we talk about movement in the body with regard to fascial health, we really want three-dimensional movements. We don't want to simply flex or extend and move in a single plane of movement, because the body's tissue is constantly reorganizing itself, breaking it down, and rebuilding itself to support your daily needs. And depending on how you move on a daily basis, rasa will then build and construct itself in all of its intelligence to support what you need from your body throughout the day, which is mobility, which is circulation, which is digestion and assimilation, and ultimately the elimination of what we don't need and no longer benefits us. So when you think about fascial health and keeping rasa tissue healthy, think about movements that include moving in a three-dimensional plane. Activities like Pilates, yoga, even a good dance in the kitchen. Movements like unloading the dishwasher and moving your arm in a three-dimensional space, right? Being able to vary your workload and the amount of compression force or tension or even torsional and twisting force on a tissue. All of these different approaches and forces applied to our soft tissue and our fascia are important to keeping it really, really healthy and hydrated. Another tip for keeping that rasa dhatu really strong is seasonal eating. We want to follow the guidelines set by the yogis in terms of eating the foods that naturally grow in our area at that time of year. This is so that the microbiome of the gut is fortified with the microbes that are in nature that given season. This is a real important key to building that capacity for immune strength and for digestive strength as well. I mean, they're really one of the same, right? If you don't have a healthy gut, you don't have a healthy mind-body. So eating seasonally, seasonal cleanses are a great way to reset the gut and keep that fascia hydrated and in a really good shape, really good environment, if you will, for that exchange of nutrients and waste, and for the flow of life force energy, of prana, that intelligent healing energy that clears our mind and digests our experiences in life so we can move into wisdom with ease, with grace, and with a little bit of fun too. Another practice that I teach and coach my clients and my clubs is intermittent fasting, and getting into a rhythm with when we're eating and when we're resting, when we're fasting from eating, and allowing the body to actually do its process of cleaning up the junk, destroying old cells, and digesting what we have in the gut. Self-massage is another way to take care of Rasa dhatu and keep that tissue really hydrated, producing more immune white T cells, fighter cells, and allowing that grounding sensation that is so balancing to the anxiety and dispersed energy that we experience so much of in mainstream culture, with overscheduling and overcommitting and not prioritizing rest and those downbeats, those pulses in between the activity that allows us for that proper replenishment and rebuilding of tissues. And self-massage is with warm oil is a great way to help contain that energy so it doesn't get so dispersed in our attention or activities throughout the day, and that we're better pacing the amount of output of that life force energy so that we've got some juice left at the end of the day for the things that really matter to us, the really important people and projects and relationships and goals that we have. So those are great ways to start with taking care of Rasa dhatu, this first tissue of liquidity and nourishment and hydration and mobility that so many of us need in our bodies and our nervous systems. It's such an important tissue that the Hindu mythology, there's a Hindu mythological story around this liquidity and the importance of it, which is the churning of the ocean. This was when the gods at the time and the mischievous ones inhabiting the universe were not getting along and fighting over resources. And so in India, when they make butter, when they make ghee or butter first, to churn the butter, they use a paddle that spins in alternate directions to churn instead of the up and down motion that we use here in North America. And in this Hindu story of the churning of the ocean, the gods and the mischievous ones were forced to churn the ocean, which would then reveal the gifts that they were looking for. And together they worked as a team. There was a large mountain centered in right dead center of the ocean, and this large snake wrapped around the mountain to serve as the handle for them to churn the ocean and produce these gifts for humanity. So the devas took one end of the snake, and the mischievous ones took the tail end, and together they would alternate pulling back and forth, spinning the mountain and thus churning the ocean. And when the ocean was churned, first all of the toxic and nauseous fumes of humanity and the poison of humanity, things like emotions of jealousy or anger, resentment, these kinds of things would churn out of the ocean first. So the poison was being released first. And this was an important lesson one of my Ayurveda teachers taught me, was that when we are in the healing journey, as we start to churn and digest what has been dark and stagnant, first, it's going to be uncomfortable. The poison's going to be released first, and often symptoms will get worse before they get better. This is part of the natural healing process. And so when these fumes were being released from the ocean, being churned, Lord Shiva came down in one of his incarnations and inhaled all of these nauseous fumes. And that's why in some of the depictions of Lord Shiva, you'll see him in the color blue, depicting this intake of the poison on behalf of humanity. And then following that, out of the ocean came the gifts, came the amrit, or the nectar of humanity, the nectar of immortality. And the patron deity of Ayurveda, this system of self-healing from India, also got spat out of the ocean. And Lord Dhanvantari was holding that pot of nectar, the nectar of immortality. And as such, that became a pretty hot item. And so onward with the story ensued more conflict around this nectar and this gift of immortality. And so ultimately an arrangement was reached that a big feast would be had, and the devas and the mischievous ones would take turns sipping from this urn of Dhanvantari's, this sip of nectar of immortality. And during the feast, one of the mischievous ones disguises themselves as one of the gods, fearing that they wouldn't get their equal portion. And just as they were about to take a sip from this pot, Lord Dhanvantari realizes there's an imposter in their midst. And so Lord Dhanvantari then throws a disc that he has in his hand and decapitates the mischievous one. The story goes on from there, but I wanted to share it in terms of understanding where some of these practices and beliefs come from, and that we honor the traditions and culture from which we're learning this beautiful mind-body global system of self-healing. And that churning of the ocean was a really nice reflection, a reminder to me anyway, about how this is really hard work of healing, that this can be and feel turbulent at times, and it can be cloudy and muddy, and it can be tumultuous and uncomfortable in the beginning, right? That there's a lot of darkness and stagnation and things that are no longer serving us well, that need to be released and let go of first. And often it requires some agitation in order for that to happen. Why? Because it's really hard to change, and especially when we're comfortable with something that has been for so long, even when it's pain or fear, it can become something we take on as our identities. And that's really incorrect. It's such a gross injustice to humanity, if I'm being frank. We really want you to be the vital and bright and joyous being that you are naturally. And so that might require you to shake things up a little bit, get uncomfortable, and make those waters turbulent and get things churning so we can get to the good stuff, the nectar, right? That self-healing flow of energy. So use those tips: intermittent fasting, seasonal eating and cleansing, self-massage, and 3-dimensional movement. Work with that and let me know how things go.